His company demands that he get along with the group and get rid of his individuality and his convictions. His wife likes all the shiny gadgets in her kitchen and the fancy apartment complex and the prospect of sending David and Sharon off to school, off to college. What does he want? No one seems to care. And this is all the American dream, right? But no one cares about the man in the middle of all that. And that's what we've been talking about in this series. We've been talking about Gary and his family. And it's not different from what a lot of you guys go through, and your fathers and your grandfathers and your great-grandfathers. And it's not right. It's time we call it out. Hi, welcome back to Far From Eden. We are on episode 6 of our review and exploration of the decline of the American male. It was written in 1958, believe it or not. It is broken up into 3 chapters written by 3 different men. Where we left off, we were talking about Gary and how he was crunched in between all these things that want something from him. Don't ask what he wants, don't care what he wants, and basically just take and take and take and take. So it's this micro look at what was going on in 1958 for an average American man. And I think you're going to see a lot of similarities in the issues that men face today. So where we left off, they had moved from Chicago to the West Coast because job, probably more money. And they're at this, sort of shallow, superficial apartment complex with the shiny gadgets and the supervised play area for the children. And everybody just gets along. They're friends by proximity, not because of a history of family and knowing each other, which in my opinion is the way it should be. And that's what holds things together. But you're just thrust into this new environment and expected to get along. And if you think about it, during this time, 2025, think about all the times you have to not talk about a certain medical procedure from the 2020 extravaganza. You can't mention it. You can't mention your own views about it. Don't mention politics. Don't talk about religion. That never used to be a thing. You used to be able to talk about whatever because you were in your own community, in your own culture. Family, friends, extended family, all of that. You didn't have to hide who you were. You didn't have to change who you were. And that eats and eats and eats at a man. And that's what has really destroyed our society when you think about it, is the train. Thomas is really letting himself be known. So we're at the apartment complex. I can't wait to get in to see what's going to happen next with all this. But life was pleasant in a negative way. At Park Meadows, there were few squabbles. Neighbors got along. Those who were withdrawn were drawn out. Those who were grouchy were battered into submission by social cheerfulness. Have fun, said the group, or else. The group took over Gary's wife and children. David, the Gray's 10-year-old son, had always been somewhat shy and withdrawn. Sorry, I read that wrong. The group took over Gary's wife and children. David, the Gray's 10-year-old son, had always been somewhat shy and withdrawn. Gary and Martha received official word of his deficiency. Oh my gosh. On his first report card from the school near Park Meadows. You guys know how much boys are diagnosed with autism, diagnosed with ADHD especially, because they just won't sit still or they just won't do this. This kid's withdrawn. He just had to move all the way to the West Coast. I said this in the last video. You're making him, just be good with it. Maybe he's not good with it. And the school's going to deal with it. Oh, who's the school again? Oh, the school is the state? Huh, that's weird. They start on you guys when you're young. They're already telling this little boy, you're not doing it right. Get along, go along. It starts when you're boys. Quote, does not fit in with other children, does not like group activity. He dreams, end quote. Martha went for a conference. She explained to his teacher that David seemed quite happy to remain alone much of the time. He was forever engrossed in some book. He would read anything he could get his hands on, but especially liked magazines and books on scientific subjects. The conference ended unsatisfactorily. The teacher remained polite, but was unimpressed with Martha's tolerance for David's solitary pursuits. They don't want you men thinking for yourselves. It's easier for women to get along with a group. It's more of our nature. But for men, you're supposed to have these tendencies, especially if you're a leader. You're supposed to be able to think and dream and be somewhat separate. You're supposed to. Right away, they're getting you so that you're a cog in the system. So you can grow up, find some woman who's going to run your life one way or another, and then into the system, work until you can't anymore. The problem of David's adjustment to the group was taken over by Mr. Brown, the supervisor of Park Meadows Playground. Mr. Brown, can you imagine other people supervising your children to play at your own apartment complex? Mr. Brown, a deadly serious, expressionless man in his 30s, was a minor prophet of the new organized world of cooperation and adjustment. He had majored in social psychology in college and was especially well-versed in group dynamics. Sure. I'm floored by this. I didn't know it was going to go this way. But yeah, the decline of the American male, that's what this is about. So they're talking about how it's starting with a little boy. One day, Mr. Brown had an inspiration. He visited the 2 elementary schools and the junior high school attended by the children of Park Meadows. From the principals of each, he obtained the names of children who were considered adjustment problems, deviates, he called them. The principals did not hesitate to give out his information without consulting the parents involved. They did not consider it a breach of confidence since it was done in the sacrosanct name of social psychology. All of this is removing you as the leader of your family. All of it is removing the roles. It's erasing the roles of the family. It's destroying the nuclear family. You cannot have a nuclear family if you do not have strong men. They know this. They're robbing you of what's rightfully yours. His list of deviates in hand, Mr. Brown telephoned all the mothers involved. He told them he was forming a Saturday morning discussion group on child behavior and asked if they would like to join. Response was good. Not a single mother refused. Of course not. They're usurping you. That's usurping. Why are the mothers in charge? We are so used to, the mothers are better with the children, la 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 la. Fathers have an instinct to protect. He doesn't know this guy. He doesn't know Mr. Brown. He doesn't know what the intentions are. He doesn't know if this is good for his children. He just blindly trusts because he has to. He's like this. They've got you like this. Oh my goodness. Sorry, I got so mad I lost my spot. On the Saturday mornings that followed, Martha along with about 24 other mothers, met in the playground clubhouse, while the little deviates played outside under the watchful eye of Mr. Brown. The mothers had coffee and donuts. The morning repast over, Mr. Brown left the playground to one of his assistants and joined the mothers for group discussion. He considered it most important that each individual problem be discussed in the presence of all the mothers. Yeah, so we can shame everybody. They're going to use shame, I know it. His study in group dynamics had taught him that people in groups tend to be less inhibited than when confronted alone, that they are more likely to reveal intimate information about themselves. Then, too, he wanted to bring into play the most powerful molding force of the present age, social pressure. He's going to pressure all these women. The man isn't there. His family's taken over. So Mr. Brown stood back, making only occasional comments as the members spilled their heart secrets. He did not lead, he only guided. With a smile, he offered up the jargon and justification of social psychology to a leaderless tyranny that had no morality other than adjustment. I'm going to read that again. With a smile, he offered up the jargon and justification of social psychology to a leaderless tyranny that had no morality other than adjustment. Well, it's not leaderless. It's just the leader is invisible. These are the overlords that want this. Later, Martha found herself in a subgroup composed of the mothers of isolates. Let me know if you guys in school, when you were young, if you felt like you had to be a certain way and it felt like you were forcing yourself as a boy to be like somewhat unnatural, to be part of the group, to follow orders. Let me know how that squeezed you. And if you think that it leads you to the plantation. This is how you get on the plantation. It doesn't start with dating. It starts when you're a boy. They start trying to train you then. It doesn't just start when you start dating little women. Like, they start indoctrinating you, conditioning you to be the work mule. And your mothers are part of it. Look at these mothers are right along for the ride. They get coffee and donuts. There is something in women that should protect their children too. It's not just up to the father. But, there's coffee and donuts. And I mean, I don't want to be unpopular. God. So she's in the subgroup with isolates. Taking turns, these mothers took the isolates on jolly little outings to parks, to the movies, to the zoo. The activity did not lessen David's desire to read, but gave him less time for it. And the implied doctrine of conformity could not fail to take effect on his sensitive young personality. His desire to be alone was somehow bad. His inner impulse toward individuality was not to be trusted. He would learn to feel guilt at being himself. Yet Gary had not seen the danger. When Martha had first told him of the meetings, he had been amused, though he had remarked jokingly that they sounded to him like the self-criticism meetings held by Communist Party members in Russia. He's seeing it, but he's powerless. His opinion doesn't matter. No one cares what Gary thinks. He's just the father. That's nothing. Good Lord. It's no wonder we are where we are today, reading this. But now he could see the pattern. Conformity to the group was being offered as the cure for all the ills of juvenile delinquency, not only at Park Meadows, but all over the country. Organized activities, supervised play, youth groups. This was the medicine. The group was always right. Yet hadn't he read, it was in the report of the Senate Subcommittee on Juvenile Delinquency, that delinquents are more frequently club members than are non-delinquents, that it is partly through his group interests that the delinquent gets into trouble in the first place. Yes, when you teach a child undue conformity to the group, when you take away his respect for the unique characteristic that makes him different from all other human beings, then you create an automaton, ideal fodder for a juvenile gang, or later a totalitarian mass movement. That's a very good point. And you would think he's thinking all this, right? And he knows how he is. He knows the pressure for him to conform, for Gary to conform at his job. He knows his son is going through that right now. They're doing it to his son. Gary, he has no power. Already in 1958, the man had no power. You know, he had no value. They take away your value when they make you conform to the group. You are individually made by our Creator. They don't want you to think like that. They want you to think, I answer to the group, not I answer to God, and to my own conscience. You listen to the conscience of the group. And that's the woman really helps to do that, because that's the trap that really makes the man, behave. It's sickening. The subtle poison of adjustment and conformity was what had taken away Gary's ability to say I. Now it was striking at his family, his children, his very way of life. And in every case, it had come clothed in good intentions, teamwork, happiness, security. Yeah, this is all for your safety. How far could the group go in the guise of security? Only last week, he had come home to find a well-groomed man in a dark suit sitting in the living room and talking to Martha. The man introduced himself as a representative of a government security agency. He was, he said, collecting data for a routine security check of one of their neighbors, Frank White. Good Lord, it's like we're reading 1984. What did Frank White read? He asked politely. What kind of magazines did he take? To what clubs and organizations did he belong? Did many strangers visit the White's house? Were there lights on late at night? Had Mr. White ever spoken out strongly in favor of racial minorities? This is so weird. It was all perfectly routine, the agent assured them. Mr. White had accepted a job in an aircraft factory where he would come in contact with secret information. No need to be hesitant, the agent said. He was merely collecting data. It would be evaluated later by experts in Washington. Trust the experts. Gary and Martha had answered freely. Fortunately, they had had nothing derogatory to contribute. Still, the agent's visit had shown Gary that there was yet another turn on the screw of conformity that the group would impose on the individual. What did Frank White read? Gary had a nervous few minutes before his own bookshelves. The information would be evaluated later. But by whom? Would Frank White ever have a chance to face the evaluators? No, for they had no faces or names. They were minions of the group. This is the overlords that he's talking about. Where, then, could a man stand in aloneness and dignity? The church was, here we go, buckle up, you guys. The church was once such a place. In theory, it still was. But from his own experience, Gary guessed that the growth of national church membership probably reflected the desire to conform as much as to worship. Yeah, I think that's astroturfed. That's not real. They wanted people to join the church because at this time, church was beginning to be infested by feminism. And in his own church, he had been a part of a most shameful surrender to the new morality of expedient conformity. The sudden growth of Park Meadows had created a need for a new church, which had opened after Gary arrived. Most of its members were around Gary's age, and since he had got in on the ground floor, he found himself, after 2 years of steady attendance and good works, a member of the board of trustees. Shortly after his appointment, it became necessary to decide upon a new minister. 5 candidates were available, and the trustees found it difficult to make a decision. But they were trained in the ways of the group. And one of them offered an enticing proposal. Why not make up a punched card for each candidate on which would be coded all relevant personal information, including the results of selected psychological tests? Boy, they're obsessed with psychology during that time. My views on psychology are not what they used to be now that I'm awake. The cards could then be run through a machine, and the machine would make the final decision. The decision would be fair and scientific. The proposal might have been put into effect, but there was no machine available for the purpose. What are we doing, AI? Lacking a machine, the trustees, using their collective group-trained brain, did their best to approximate one. That is, they picked the man who was the most average, least original, and therefore safest. Have you guys felt like that in your lives? That you kind of have to draw back your own personality and leadership skills because you know that to advance in your career or in any which way, it's going to actually hurt, because those things are not celebrated. Those masculine things are not celebrated. Later, there was a church tea attended not only by the new minister, but by one of the defeated candidates. This young man, the least average and most original of the candidates, had heard of the punched card proposal and was not afraid to tell Gary just what he thought about it. "Mr. Gray," he said, "I firmly believe that when individual men will abrogate their moral responsibility to machines and the group, then we have arrived at the state of hell on earth." Well, that guy sounds fantastic. Wow. The words echoed in Gary's memory. Perhaps here was the real tragedy of conformity to the nameless standards of the faceless group. When a man forgets the meaning of I, he loses not only the ability to love, but the ability to worship, to make moral and religious decisions. Exactly. And that's what they want. They want you disconnected from he who created you. They want you disconnected from that. That's where many men find their peace and feed their souls. That's where they find their value. That's why they can have standards. That's how they have purpose. But if you don't have that, if they disconnect you from that, well, you have to base right and wrong on the group, on your feelings, on whatever, and your value, same thing. You have to find it. The group, the overlords, have way more control over you when you are disconnected from whence you came. It's just the truth. And I know there are a lot of agnostics, atheists, other faiths. I welcome you guys. I'm so glad you're here. But don't you think that that sense of self that comes from something greater is important to stand up against this group mentality, these I don't know, forced morals that say you have to go along with what they think. You have to make all of them happy regardless of what it is. You could not have had 2020 happen and all the compliance without generations of this. Generations of this is what makes it so people will not wake up, like on the Matrix. Generations of this is what makes men think that they have to put up with what they're putting up with. that if they don't want to, that something's wrong with them. Because it's generations of this. I misspoke earlier when I said it didn't start with dating. It started when you were a boy. It started before you were born. Generations ago. We haven't even traced it back yet. But I think it's important to understand it so you can know what it is you've been fighting against this whole time. Because it's more than, your ex-wife. It's more than that. How did the family law get so against you? How are people fine to just go along with it? Generations of telling men, do what we say, go along, or you're a problem and we will target you. And that's also how they turn other men against you. I had somebody in the comments ask me today, how does society hate men when 50% of society is men? And I think that's a really good question. And this is the answer. Because a lot of you have been turned against yourselves. You act against your own self-interests, right? You've got men telling you, man up and get married, sign the government contract. You've got men doing that. That's how. They are so indoctrinated, they are so blue-pilled that they pressure the rest of you to, happy wife, happy life. And Gary is living happy wife, happy life. If he had a good wife, he wouldn't. Then the overlords and all that, like the groupthink, wouldn't have any control over him. Because the wife would be like, our son David is a wonderful boy, and I don't want to take him to these groups that tell him that his personality is not good. He's creative, he's a dreamer, he reads a lot. I don't want to get in the way of that. I think that's wonderful. I think we should encourage it. But no, she'd rather be part of the group and have her coffee and donuts. So often we are told women love their children. Women put their children first. I can make arguments against that, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Okay. Sorry. So he's losing, this is how they lose the ability to say I and to love and to worship and to make moral and religious decisions. Then, no matter how high his standard of material living, he is plunged, if not into hell, at least into a lasting limbo. From his own experiences, Gary Gray was convinced that that was the kind of world to which he would rise this morning. Let us leave Gary Gray for a moment to ask if his problems are unique. Gary is a composite character living in a fictitious neighborhood, but none of his experience are entirely fictional. Okay, so it's not a real guy, but they pulled together stories. Nor are they unusual. They have happened and are happening again and again every day and night all over America. No person reading this can escape the insidious pressures toward conformity. These pressures, due to the tools, mass communications, and techniques, psychological knowledge of the modern age, are more effective on a wider scale today than ever before. Propaganda. But at last, America seems to be waking up to the danger of conformity. There are signs that the hidden menace is being uncovered. That's what we're saying nowadays, too. Do we ever uncover it, or do they just make us think that everybody's waking up, but they never let everybody wake up? Last June, the danger of conformity was the most popular topic of well-known commencement speakers. Books on conformity and related subjects have moved from the sociologist libraries to the bestsellers lists. Several large corporations have recently changed their tack on conformity. Finding that conformity leads eventually to stagnation, certain companies are seeking ways to encourage individuals to work in intelligent tension with established policy. I think they're just making people think that, like, oh, look, you can be individual. I think they're corralling it because we're in the same boat today. Absolutely. You men are absolutely strangled. The nation's loss of leadership in the international brains race has laid to rest the myth of a comfortable mediocrity. No longer is it possible to find satisfaction in the fact that our scientists and leaders are good guys, team players, and airtight security risks. What? The present age, as every other, demands dedication, daring, and persistent individualism. I think they got everybody in the group, and then they had individuals within the group. They disconnected you from family and from spirituality, and then said, look at you, you're an individual. You're an individual within the group. They're good at this. They're good at trapping you. And they just are. At the same time, conformity is becoming a favorite topic for table talk. Most of this talk, however, has to do with the growing sameness in taste for clothing and gadgets, which actually is only a symptom of the more serious malady. True individualism has little to do with wearing a beard or painting a development house black. It is the ability to love and to make moral decisions as an individual. Similarly, teamwork and group action are not undesirable until they become ends in themselves, until adjustment to the group becomes a way of life. Individualism versus conformity is, finally, a moral problem. It cannot be approached until it is remembered that the group was created for the individual, rather than the individual for the group. But before we can act, we, like Gary, must understand. Yeah. That's, yeah. Now for one last look, the briefest of vignettes at Gary Gray as he rises with his newly won knowledge of the pressures that have poisoned his life. We cannot honestly report that he will make an immediate, radical change that will rescue him from conformity. No, he won't, because his wife will leave him with the kids and all the rest of it. Now, that was before no-fault divorce, so I don't know how easy that would be, but he doesn't want to risk it. He doesn't want to risk losing everything. That's the trap they put you in. His problems and ours are too serious to be solved in a morning or a week or even a year. But we can look in on him as he performs an act familiar to most everyone. He lifts the phone and dials. He hears a ring and a quick answer. I'm sorry, sir. Reservations is busy. One moment, please. He waits, smiling, looks at his watch. A minute passes, 2 minutes. The group formula is a little off today. Finally, there is a click, and a pleasant but mechanical feminine voice speaks. This is reservations. Can I help you? Yes, you can, but first, I've waited 2 minutes and 5 seconds for you. Now, why don't you wait 2 minutes and 5 seconds for me? There is a little gasp. Then he hears the voice repeating his words for the benefit of someone else. The voice laughs. He laughs. All right, what shall we talk about? The voice is no longer mechanical. The ticket clerk is no longer a representative of the group. She is a human being, an individual, and so is he. Yeah, for a brief moment. The next chapter is entitled, Why Does He Work So Hard? And that's the last segment of the book. And it is probably the biggest because that's the whole point, isn't it? Dance, monkey, dance. Work, mule, work. Get on that plantation. Get on that plantation so you can pay a lot of taxes and give your wife all these shiny gadgets and stuff and big houses that nobody needs and bunch of cars that nobody needs. Just keep earning more, keep up with the Joneses. It's terrible, and I hate that it's your reality, your father's reality, your great grandfather's reality. And the only answer is MGTOW. It's not just about walking away from women. It's about walking away from, why do you have this job. Maybe you like it. If you love it, great. That's different. But so many men don't. Like, how much do you really need? Men don't need fancy houses. They don't care about that stuff. It's all to impress women. And because, you were told to. Do what you want to do. Have what you want to have. There's no need to just work really hard to get yourself in a higher tax bracket where you have to pay more. They just want you on that plantation. The women do, the government does, your job does. It's time to leave the plantation. It's been long enough. It's done. It's over. You don't have to do what the men in your church say you need to do to be a good Christian. Because misery loves company. The men on the plantation want you on the plantation too. You don't need to do that. You don't. I'm tired of seeing good men suffering needlessly because they're taken advantage of and they're just fleeced. You're just worked to death. Stressed, worked, all of it. Anyway, I want you guys to protect your peace and feed your souls. You need to do that. That's a storm. We got some thunder going on. I don't know if you guys can hear that. But yeah, take care of yourselves. Find brothers who have woken up too. They're here. They're on our Discord. Come into our Discord, talk. There's a bunch of guys that are awake to more than just the woman problem, right? So much more. And there's a brotherhood there that is I think, very valuable. So please feed your souls. Please protect your peace. I love you guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.